We'll start the webinar. So welcome everyone to Create Connect's Q&A with the Create New South Wales Artform Board. Today we are here with members of Classical Music, Opera and Choral Artform Advisory Board members who will share with you their thoughts on the arts and culture funding applications. Next slide, please. So my name is Ian Cifuentes from the Arts and Funding Development Team and Lead Officer here at Create New South Wales. And joining me as co-host is Ryley Ray. Ryley is the Manager for the Arts Funding and Development Team. But before we begin, I'd like to warmly acknowledge the First Nations custodians and knowledge holders of country throughout Australia, including the lands you are living and working and joining us on today for this webinar. I acknowledge the Gadigal lands on which I am joining you all from, and that Create New South Wales is situated in the place that is now called Sydney. I give deep respect to these elders past and present, and extend this warm respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining us today. Next slide, please. So I'd like to just go through some quick housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded and an edited version will be published online. Please keep your mics on mute, and for a better viewing experience, please click on the View Everyone tab in the top center of the screen and select View Active Cameras. If you'd like to ask a question, please feel free to type them into the chat box, which you can access by clicking the speech bubble in the top right-hand corner, and I'll ask our guest speakers. Next slide, please. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome and introduce our Artform Board guest speakers. We have Ryley Gillen, Cassie Green, and Professor Matthew Hindson. Hi guys, I'd like to just open this up for each of you to go through and just give a little bit, talk a little bit about yourself. So what we'll do is we'll start with Casey, if you don't mind.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Lovely to be here with you. My name's Casey. I'm the classical music producer at the Sydney Opera House. I'm also on the board of Ensemble Apex, a collective of young classical players in Sydney. And it's a pleasure to be on the board. I'm currently at the Pitt Street offices of the Sydney Opera House on Gadigal land, and I pay my respects as well to our elders past, present and emerging. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Casey. Ryley?
Morning, everyone. My name's Ryley Gillen, and I'm one of the board members that excitedly assesses your applications. When I was appointed to the board, I was told I was the youngest board member out of all the boards, and I wear that with a badge of honor. It's not something I think I'll be able to hold on to forever, so I'll take it while I can. But I think it puts me in a unique perspective to advocate for youth, especially for the future of our art industry. I think everything that we fund goes towards benefiting the next generation of performers, audience members, and a healthy art industry. So other than freelancing as a trumpeter and conductor, I work extensively in regional music education. I've done some stints with the Wollongong Conservatorium and Hume Conservatorium, and I now manage the Shoalhaven Youth Orchestra, which is a regional-based youth orchestra, and I'm artistic director of Illawarra On Pointe Productions, which is a orchestral ballet company in Wollongong that puts together the 40 local dance studios and performs with a symphony orchestra. And I'm really excited to be here with my colleagues and Create New South Wales to go through the application process with you.
Awesome, thanks, Ryley. That's amazing. And Matthew.
Hi everyone, Matthew Hindson here. I am a composer and also am the Deputy Dean of the Sydney Conservatorium of Music, and it's great to be able to contribute to Create New South Wales and to see amazing projects coming forward from all those people who are applying.
Awesome. Thanks, Matthew. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate you guys on board and your time is with us as well, and what will start to be a start of a good conversation. But before we get into our discussion, I just thought it would be great for Ryley to just talk a little bit around the process and overview. Ryley?
Thank you so much, Ian. So under the ACFP, we have grants available for individuals and organizations. So both individuals, and that includes groups and bands, and organizations, they can apply for project funding as well as creative choral projects. And organizations also have the opportunity to apply for what's called annual organization funding. So there's currently a round open now, and it will close on the 1st of March, but there's also another opportunity opening in July. In addition to that main round, we also have small project grants for funding up to $5,000, which is open all year round. And we also have creative leadership opportunities, which are fellowships that we have with partner organizations, and they tend to open early in the year. And currently, we have an opportunity for a conductor fellowship with Sydney Youth Orchestras. So all of the information about our programs and guidelines, you can find them on the Create New South Wales website. So please check them out. There we go. So just a little bit of information about how the assessment process works. So our Artform Advisory Board, they play such a huge part in that, and we're so grateful for their work. Basically, each Artform Advisory Board member would assess all of the application that goes into their Artform board. At times, that can actually mean hundreds of applications, so I don't envy jobs at all. And then once all of those applications are assessed, they come together as a board to discuss those applications. And coming out of those discussions is a set of recommendations along with a ranking of the applications. That initial set of recommendations is then further discussed and considered alongside Create New South Wales. And in particular, there is consideration made to the distribution of the funding across art forms, across the state, as well as consideration of community and sector needs, as well as priority areas. And then only after that point is a set of recommendations put forward to the Minister for his consideration and final approval. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of difficult decision making that happens throughout that process, but hopefully Matthew, Ryley and Casey, along with Ian, can give you a bit of an insight into that process today. And on that, back to Ian.
Thanks, Ryley. Yeah, so one of the key components in the application are the assessment criteria. So across all the arts and cultural funding program grants, the criteria are merit, impact, and viability. And that's what we'll delve into now. Next slide, please. So a lot of questions that come through and a couple of inquiries that we've had of recent just around the merit section and the different areas of the criteria. I thought what we'll do is just bring some of those questions up and ask each of the board members, just from their perspective, what kind of advice or recommendations they can provide. So I'll start with Casey, if that's okay. So in terms of what does excellence mean from an applicant's point of view, what does excellence mean to you, and what demonstrates excellence from a project's key objectives?
So excellence is usually the first, or the merit component of the application is usually what catches our eye first. It's integral to what the project is about, what funding, what you're actually applying for funding for at its core. And we are looking for things like, you know, the ambition of the project. How does it fit within your core business as an organisation or your work as an individual? We're looking for, you know, collaborators, key collaborators, who they are, what their work has been in the past, anything that you can provide with letters of support, audio examples, and any evidence that kind of frames for the board the quality and the heart of what you're requiring funding for. And I feel like, particularly in the classical opera and choral sector, where the kind of standard is that real season, that concert season format with subscribers, what really catches our eyes are projects that are new and interesting, with, yeah, like I said, a high quality of artists, and interesting concepts, basically.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Matthew or Ryley, is there anything that any thoughts that you might have, or anything you'd like to add?
If I may, just one thing is that yeah, when we talk about and Casey mentioned the quality of the artists, and that's key. But I mean, if for those which have more of a community focus, perhaps in their work, it can be in the excellence around the engagement with the community. So it's really got to do with what's at the core of your project, and what's the core objectives of your project, and how are they excellent in what they are attempting to do, and how you explain it to us. Excellence is a funny thing, because we all sort of, it's one of those things that we all know, don't we? But we don't. Yeah. It's hard to define. But just think that we don't want to fund mediocrity. That's not a good use of anyone's time or funds. So I think it's really important that you make the case about whatever your terms are, what makes this excellent. And yeah, so it can be up to you to define it, really. That can be quite helpful to us.
Excellent. Ryley?
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think Matthew makes a good point about making your case. I mean, the merit section is a really good opportunity for you to clearly outline a vision, and from there, you know, show us how that'll be delivered. I think in showing us that you're passionate is really important, in laying out, you know, what that excellence for you is important, and then that gives confidence in us that you'll be able to deliver on your project or program. So that's really crucial to the merit section, I find.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, well spoken. Thanks, guys. And just to flow on from that, I think with the next question, what makes a competitive project plan, I think is quite an interesting one as well. I thought maybe Matthew, if you'd like to share your thoughts around that.
Yeah, look, I think what's really important is that we get a sense that you're in charge and you know what you want to do, and as many confirmations as you can get is a really good thing. So if you get, for example, a project plan and you know, you haven't confirmed the musicians, you might not have confirmed the venues, even if they're tentative confirmations. If someone else has, they're going to come across as having a more competitive, they're going to come across as having a more competitive project plan than you. So I think that confirmations where they're possible, and a really strong sense that you know what you're doing, both in terms of the project plan, but also the budget is also really important in that regards. I think the better you can make that, the better your application will be received.
Yeah, perfect. Ryley or Casey, anything else you'd wanted to add?
I'd just say make sure you really everything's clearly defined in that project plan, and you give us as much information as you think as you can possibly give us, because like Matthew said, it's a highly competitive process, and if someone comes along and they've got a more detailed project plan, they're going to probably score higher than you if you don't give us all that detail.
Yeah, cool. Casey?
Nothing really further to add other than I know we'll probably touch on this later, but detail is excellent, but we also want concise information and also realism in a project plan. So grandiose or flowery statements tend to muddy the water a little bit. So as much as possible, we require clarity and evidence that we can tie it back to your core work, so we know that the project plan aligns with what you do normally, and we can feel confident that you'll successfully deliver it.
Yeah, brilliant. Look, we all know that it's been really tough and really challenging time with the current climate and COVID-19 and restrictions. So this next question is quite a common one that we get at the moment. It would be great, maybe Ryley, if you want to kick this off, just in this next question, will projects need to adapt to the possibility of being developed and presented while COVID-19 restrictions still apply?
I think the very short answer might be no, but in saying that, we've seen a lot of applicants come across our desk that are showing, they're adaptive and they're able to change to the current climate, and that is an important aspect. I think if something good's come out of the pandemic, it's the fact that artists are now actually documenting their work, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later, where support material is so crucial. So if anything, it does allow artists to actually start collecting, documentation of their work so they can show us their art practice. I'm sure some of the other board members might want to contribute to that answer though.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, how about Matthew? Would you like to share some thoughts?
Well, I agree with Ryley on that, and I think it's really important that they don't have to adapt to it. Because I mean, we don't know by the time it all gets funded and your project's due to, who knows what the situation's going to be, and we're well aware of that. I do like Ryley's point, particularly about the documentation, and I'd urge people to think about that when they're putting in their grant applications, because it just means you're thinking for the future, not just for the now, the future life of your project, not just for the performances or whatever it is.
Yeah, Casey.
Agreed, definitely. I would say our role as a board is to assess the quality of the application and recommend it for funding or not. So I feel like we, as much as possible, we try to take the project on face value and determine its merit and viability and impact, of course. And almost the New South Wales health conversation is subsequent to that, if any. We wouldn't want to not fund an application because we were fearful of a COVID outbreak. I mean, I don't think that's our role.
Yeah, good points. Thanks, guys. There's a few other questions that we get quite common and around the merits. Next slide, please. And I thought it would be great, just from the perspective of each of you and with your knowledge and experience, and history and just seeing everything that's happened at the moment. What if this is a new development for an applicant and they don't have the relevant samples of work? What would you advise them? So maybe Casey, would you mind kicking that off?
I would say, I think that's great. I mean, obviously you're not pigeonholed as an artist, and any work that you want to apply for, we're obviously happy to see. It does make it tricky when it's a little bit different to your previous work, but we would just say, in my opinion, send us through samples of previous work. It might be different, but anything that you can give us that might allow us to draw a picture of the quality of your work. I mean, even though your future projects might be a little bit different, we can still make assessments based on previous work. And I would just say, paired with that, as clear and concise explanation as possible as to why this is different, your feelings and drive behind it, just to, as much as possible, give us context as to why you've changed the way you're working, or anything like that. And as much as possible, just provide us information about previous work, even if you feel like it might not be, you might feel like it might not be relevant, but it could be for us. So when in doubt, just put it in, I think.
Yeah, excellent. I like that. When in doubt, just put it in, making sure that it's relevant. It'd be great to hear from Matthew or Ryley if there's anything you'd like to add to those as well. It'd be nice to hear. Maybe Ryley?
I'll jump in. I feel good. Yeah, like Casey said, I mean, going back to our merits and excellence, we want to see excellence in you as an artist or in your program. So how do you show that? How do you best show that if you don't have the sample of works? Well, support letters are really important to know that can speak to your character, so that we know that, you know, you are who you are. You're a hard worker. You're a visionary. All those things that we're looking for. You're ambitious. Things like that. Things that speak to your character is really important. So that the same as Casey said. So that way we get a clear idea of context and the drive behind your program, and that you've got people supporting you. And I'm sure we're going to talk about support letters in a moment anyway, so I won't say too much more.
Definitely, sure.
If I can jump here, and I might sort of, if it's okay with you, Ian, I'll sort of cover all three. I think that you must have, you will have relevant samples of your work or your artist's work with whom you're working. As Casey said, it's even just a quality, to assess the quality. I mean, there's been some applications we've had where no audio or video support material was required, and don't presume that all the members of the board know who you are and the quality of your work. So I think that's, and support material is in fact crucial. I know I've assessed many applications in the past where the absolutely brilliant application, and then you go to the support material and it's like, oh, okay, you just can't fund it in the end because the quality isn't there. And we are a musical board, and that's what we're going to respond most best to. I'd say, with not going against Ryley's, if in doubt, put it in, but we've only got limited time to assess, so I would have put in a maximum of 10 minutes audio or video work. The best represents the project as much as you can, or the quality of the artists. And interestingly, that Ryley, you take a lot from letters for support. I don't actually take much from them at all, because you can always find someone to write a good letter about you. That's my opinion about it. So I don't take that much by it. But the confirmation letters, I think, are really important. That's really essential as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Matthew. It's good to hear like the differences in what each board member looks at and kind of goes through, just because there are such a high number of applications and a lot of reading and a lot of listening too. Maybe Casey, is there any thoughts that you would like to add to that, just in terms of support material, letters of support, confirmation letters, things of that nature?
I mean, great points on all, and you can see how different board members read the applications. I would add, in addition to confirmation letters, which Matthew rightly said are supremely important, particularly when you're, proposing a project or a program that involves other artists. We want to know that any artistic crew involved are committed and on board, basically, before we would recommend it for funding. Or at least, as Matthew said, in principally on board, if you know what I mean. They know about the project, basically. And also for organisations, I find, I don't know if this is directly in the same category, but previous annual reports, things like that probably speak more to the viability prism, but anything like that is really important for us to get a picture of your organisation or your project.
Great, thanks, Casey. Ryley, was there anything that you wanted to, just any final thoughts?
Yeah, look, just again, it's a highly competitive process. So think about how your application is gonna be the best that it possibly can. You know, like the board members have said, that audio and visual is so crucial for what is a music board, so that we can know the quality of your work, and that will score it, you know, better than other ones, like Matthew said, that perhaps don't include those crucial elements that we need to see or hear, I should say.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. Thanks, Matthew and Casey. Really good information there. Next slide, please. And what we'll do is we'll move on to the next criteria, which is impact. And know that impact is pretty important and equally weighted. I thought maybe we'll start with you, Matthew. Maybe we can touch on, go through maybe some of your thoughts around these areas of questions that people ask, just about how can an applicant demonstrate the impact of their work, what are you looking for, and maybe flow into the priority areas and how important those are, and also in terms of innovation.
Okay, so in terms of the impact, there's a number of different categories from which you can apply, and I'll just make sure that you're answering the question. You're answering, actually addressing the actual criteria that you've selected. That's really important. Often we get ones and it's like, why are you talking about this? And why are you talking about audience impact here when really it would seem that your project's all about art form impact, for example. So just make sure you consider that really carefully. That is it's an equally rated criteria with the other ones, so it's really important. Priority areas, absolutely. And the priority areas we are looking for are set by the government and by the minister, and they include Western Sydney and regional and rural New South Wales. Will you score? You score more if you engage with priority areas. Well, again, it's a competitive process, and if you have a significant engagement with those priority areas, yeah, you're going to come out more than someone that has no engagement with those areas, most likely. Innovation. Yeah, well, an innovation can mean lots of different things, and I think innovation is important, particularly because it just means you're not doing more of the same. And it's not that there's necessarily anything wrong with doing more of the same, but again, define what you mean by innovation. If innovation is really important to you, then why is your project innovative? And I think convince us that it is, and that'll be really helpful for your application.
Oh, good advice and recommendations. Ryley, any thoughts or from your experience? Yeah.
The impact, like Matthew said, we get applications where they unfortunately miss the mark with explaining the impact, or we feel that they would be better if they explained the other impact, rather, you know, audience impact or art form impact. So really careful consideration as to what your project and objectives is actually going to impact is really important to getting a good score and being successful. I would say that the impact section is basically a chance for you to tell us why your project must be funded, you know, why we can't possibly go without funding it. So really laying out your case clear and succinctly, like Casey had earlier said, not making grand statements, but actually, you know, giving us some facts and explaining why that the project, you know, just has to be funded is really important. And yeah, think about the reach of the project. So if it's for audience, you know, who's your audience and what's the strategies used for either increasing, diversifying is really important. We want to see that you're perhaps not just catering to your own base, but perhaps looking to expand, or at least that's one that I definitely would score highly, would be something that's looking to expand. And then art form impact, it's really important to understand what you're talking about in that section, and so provide details on how your project will you know, innovate and advance the art form.
Yeah, really, thanks, Ryley. That's really cool. Casey, with your knowledge and your experience and background, is there anything you could add to that as well?
Thanks, Ian. I agree with everything that Matthew and Ryley have flagged. I think that impact is such a hard thing to kind of quantify, really, and I find that I can understand why people find this part a little bit challenging. I mean, for example, we often have applications where applicants will select the audience impact and then they'll just tell us how many audience members will be at a certain project. But it's not really about that. It's about how those audience members are impacted, and are they, you know, as Ryley mentioned, are they diverse from your standard audience? Will this project have a long-lasting impact on them? Is it, you know, is it the beginning of a series of things, or you know, how does it kind of leave them changed, essentially? And I feel that that's really important, and I think kind of also speaks to impact is a really nice way to loop in those priority areas. I mean, are you going to regional New South Wales to run a program? And if so, are you, you know, how are you meaningfully entering those communities and you know, yeah, like making an impact, basically. And I feel like I should also mention, as Matthew flagged before, that the audience, art form and operational impacts, they're all marked equally. So we find value in applications that kind of direct themselves into each category. So yeah, like Ryley and Matthew said, just think carefully about how your project best aligns with any of those impacts. And yeah, that's going to be what will make your application sing at the end of the day.
Awesome. Thank you for those insights and information. I guess finally what we'll move on to is the viability. And Casey, I mean, you know, you were speaking earlier, and it would be good just to answer, because we usually get a lot of questions around the viability, but just from your point of view, what are you looking for in a project budget, and how does an applicant make a budget look or positively viewed by panel members?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the great thing about Create New South Wales is we actually get significant help from Create New South Wales for this portion of the application process. So we're always looking at, you know, vetting whether the budget is essentially a realistic reflection of the scope of the project. I mean, personally, I read budgets a lot of the time. So I feel like the board members generally have a pretty good temperature check on being able to read the scale of a project or a program and assess the funding of that. Yeah, so basically we're looking for realism, detail. We want to see that, you know, you're including award rates for workers that you're employing on a project or program, that you're documenting in-kind support, and that you're just kind of going over it with a fine-tooth comb and capturing as in much detail as possible everything that you could possibly think of for getting your project up.
Yeah, cool, excellent. Maybe Matthew, or is there anything you'd like to add to that, and anything else around budget?
Only thing to say, you know, there's a question, will I be scored less if some of my budget is not confirmed? I'm not entirely sure what that means, because if you put it into the budget, well, I mean, yeah, if it's just an ambit claim, we're all experienced musicians and practitioners on the board, and we can sniff that stuff out. So I would say go to an effort to actually try and find accurate and relevant information. But the budget really does tell us how realistic and how viable your project will be to deliver. So for example, if you're planning a tour and you know, like you haven't included accommodation costs or something, and even if they're in kind, they're still included. We know that tells us you've actually thought about it, and so that's really important, having relevant budget figures. There may be some projects which have quite a minimal budget, and that's perfectly fine as well. If for example, it might be to get a composer to write a new work, and the main money is to go to the composer. Well, that's what's there, if that's what your application is all about. So you don't have to go overboard, but you just have to make sure everything relevant to the project's success is in the budget, so we can see you've actually thought about it.
Yeah, great point, Matthew. Ryley, is there anything you'd like to add?
I think everything's really been discussed, which is fantastic by Casey and Matthew. I would just say we do have a fantastic team at Create New South Wales that looks over the budgets and then provides the board in our assessment days with a rundown on the viability of each application. And that's extremely important for us so that we can make that judgment. And like Matthew and Casey said, we are familiar with looking over these kind of figures as well, so we can sniff out those errors, things like not including costs for this or that. It's really important to include as much as you can, including the in-kind support, so we know that that's been considered and not missed out of the budget.
Thanks, Ryley. Thanks, Matthew, and thank you, Casey. Really excellent points, and thank you so much for covering a lot of those areas. I wanted to know, just thinking more broadly, next slide, please. Just so thinking more broadly about grant applications as a whole, what advice would you have, Matthew? You wrote this article about the 5 Cs, and it'd be great if you could just tell us more about it.
Yeah, look, after I'd finished my stint on the Australia Council, I assessed about 2,000 grants by then. I think I'm up to about 3,000 now. I've got those 5 Cs, which will be very sort of obvious to most of you, but it's actually quite useful. The first one, clear, is to ensure that your written text is to the point, and I'd avoid too much jargon, because you don't know, it doesn't actually help anybody. Make things concise, as Casey said before, because more words does not equal a better application. Avoid the waffle. Comprehensive, so we want something that's going to be achievable, and as we said with the budgets, for example, and in other areas, we want to make sure that you've thought about everything to make the project actually have a chance of success. Address the criteria, and we've talked a lot about that. In fact, we've gone through the 3 criteria today, and so really don't be scared to make your application specifically tailor to those criteria that we're looking at. They're published, and really make it convincing. It's not enough to stand on if you're an existing organisation. I don't really think it's to your benefit to stand on your perceived laurels. I think you still need to, tell us how great you are, tell us how great your artists are, tell us how great your project is, and really, as Ryley said, make this something we want to fund. We'd be like, how can we fund this? Make sure we fund this, because they're the ones that really come through very clearly to us.
Excellent, thank you, Matthew. Yeah, the article is really great. For anyone that wants to have a read through that, it's the link's there on the chat box. The 5 Cs. Thank you so much, guys, and thank you again, Matthew, for that, and Casey and Ryley. What we'll do now is move over to some questions from the audience. If anyone has any questions, here's your chance to write them in or speak to the panel, the board. So if there's anything any questions, Merrily?
So it's not my question, but it's actually a question from Jeremy from Stills Strings, and it was a question that came online. So I'm just going to read out that question for you. Basically, the question is, what legal requirements are in place for COVID-19 restrictions for the performing artists? What's the correct source of information for New South Wales, and is there an industry benchmark that must be followed? So maybe Ryley, do you have something to comment?
Yeah, I would say we would follow the guidelines of New South Wales Health, being in New South Wales, and I think that's the first point of call for all those COVID restrictions for artists. I know I'm familiar with there's a round table for community groups. I can't quite remember the name, but there is a roundtable talk between the New South Wales Health and Community Music Ensembles, and that's being a fantastic thing for channeling information. So I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but I know it's found on Facebook, and they've been in contact with New South Wales Health and providing lots of updates for their community ensembles. And I would say that's a good point to find more information specific to musicians or community music groups.
And Jeremy, I guess from a Create New South Wales perspective, we do have a particular group that looks at, COVID-19 and the public health restrictions. So there's a group called Project Awake, and that is currently led by Becky Dean. And so, Jeremy, yeah, like if you like, we can put you in touch with Beck to provide you with more specific information.
That'd be great. Thank you.
No worries, Jeremy. Any other questions?
So the question from Danielle in the chat about how are orgs accounting for in kind. Look, how you choose to do it within your organisation is up to you, but I would say we would like to see it in the application that comes to us. If that's an answer to your question.
Am I able to unmute and actually, I was trying to type and listen at the same time, sorry. Hi. Yeah, what I'm wondering about that is with the budgets that we had to fill in for the Create actual application, it incorporated in-kind into our audited accounts, and my accountant won't let me do that. We keep our in-kind separate to our actual accrual and cash flow. And so and then I've spoken to a few different orgs, and there is apparently ways in which that can be shown. And I just was wondering if anyone knew how are other people doing it.
I guess, yeah. So like, yeah, we've spoken at length about this in the previous round, Dan. Yeah, look, it is. I actually think that your situation is a little bit unusual. Usually, you would in accounts to have it, within the actual, financial statements, but you can put a value. So it may not show up in your audited financial statements, but in the actual Excel budget template. Essentially, what you consider in-kind support, you'll need to show it as part of your income as well as part of your expenses. So an example of that is, for example, a venue. If there's a particular venue that another group might be lending to you, you could attach a value to that, whether it's the rate that you would otherwise pay on an hourly basis, or what it is that what may be a relevant cost. And so yeah, you would add what that cost would otherwise be as an income, and then as an expense you would also notably add that, so that you balance those two figures up.
I get how to do it in terms of projection. What I'm questioning is, how do you do it? Is there a way that others are doing it once you've done it? Like, are people asking for receipts or things to actually then be able to say, like, so we are very lucky to have a venue gifted to us that would be worth like 70 or 80,000 a year. How are we, because if you're building an argument that says that you're well supported, how is there a way of which people are actually showing this? Yeah, great. It's fine for the forward stuff. It's the backward stuff that I'm not sure how other people are doing it. I was wondering.
Yeah, even letters of support or confirmation letters would be sufficient for that purpose. So yeah, if you have a particular, or like an MOU, those are all sufficient for that purpose. And actually, it also safeguards your partnership with that group as well.
Great. Okay, cheers.
No worries. We have a question from Claire. With regards to innovation, do you mean musically, conceptually, or both? Maybe Casey.
Sure. I would say, in short, both. I think Matthew mentioned earlier about innovation being obviously tied to the project. So if your project is if you've got an audience impact that you're seeking in your project, we would seek innovation that related to that kind of framework. So musically, obviously, if you've got an innovative music project that's measured by its art form impact, that will really be well-rounded and sing as an application. Whereas if you've got an innovative musical work and you're seeking to display its operational impact, that kind of will fall a bit flat. So it does depend a little bit on the style of project or program that you're seeking funding for, but it's definitely not. We're not just seeking edgy new musical compositions. That's not what we're after. It's more of a broad sense of innovation.
Yeah, so, and I'd back that up as a composer as well. I mean, don't presume that innovation means 1960s classical music modernism. In fact, that's old-fashioned. So you may be innovative in your choice of programming. That may be your innovation. You may be innovative through who you might be doing innovative new partnerships with a range of artists who've never worked together before, but who you're making the case that will be really an innovative result when it comes out. So yeah, it's got to do with how you also are going to define how you're being innovative. It's up to you to do that. And we're not looking for a particular form of innovation. As Casey said, it's really what you're going to do that's going to be innovative.
Claire, does that answer your question?
Yes. Hi. Sorry. Yes, it does. Thank you so much. That was really, really valuable. Because yeah, I think as a composer, you do wonder whether it's the innovations of the skill of composition itself, or more that you're broadening people that can access, particularly say classical music. I'm really interested in making it accessible to people that don't usually consume it, or people that aren't represented in classical or operatic music. So yeah, that's really useful. I don't necessarily have to do really strange avant-garde stuff. Thank you.
Well, you don't do strange avant-garde stuff. We want to do stuff which is excellent, but strange and avant-garde is not necessarily excellent.
Yes.
So,
oh, sorry. Yeah. Not to diminish anything avant-garde, which I actually really appreciate, but just more.
I mean, I don't write that stuff either anymore. So that's like it's fine. But and in that case, maybe if you're going to bring new audiences to classical music, what sort of music are you going to bring to it, and how? And the support material will be absolutely crucial there, because we need to know exactly what you're talking about. So make sure that your support material really backs up the type of music is you're talking about as well.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
I was just going to jump in and say that is a really great example of how assessing the priority areas to create something that is more innovative is a really interesting way of looking at it. So seeing how you could incorporate catering to a priority area to elevate your project and innovate it in that way would be a great approach, I think.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Yeah.
So are there any more last moment questions? What? Okay, well, that's looks like that's all the questions we have for the moment. Look, I just wanted to wish and thank everyone for attending. Thank you to the Create New South Wales team. Also, thank you for everyone who has attended, and most of all, thanks again to Casey, Ryley, and Matthew for sharing their knowledge and their experience. the amazing things that they do. They're so great to have these guys on board. They're amazing, just incredible people, so very good people. So thank you again for your time, and it's been a pleasure. But before we go, I just wanted to pass over to Ryley.
So everyone, please know that this is not the end. If you do have more questions, you can get in touch with us. We have that general number on the screen for you. But if you wanted to get in touch with us directly, our details is on the Create New South Wales website. In addition to us, there are also organisations that you can approach for support. Specifically, I would like to highlight the work of service organisations, as well as larger organisations in New South Wales as well. And you can find details of these groups also on the Create New South Wales website by clicking on the Arts in New South Wales tab. So please do have a look at that, and but please feel free to get in touch with us at any time, during the rounds or throughout the year if you have any questions. But yeah, other than that, we look forward to receiving your applications. We wish you all the best, and yeah, we hope that today has been useful. So yep, now back to Ian.
Excellent. Thank you, Ryley. Thanks, everyone. And thank you for all your comments, and appreciate your time, and hope you have a safe end of the week and weekend.